This is video number 2 in a 4-part series on 4 steps to overcoming OCD. Hi, my name is John Hawkins Jr. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, certified trauma specialist, and co-founder of Hawkins Counseling Center. This is the second video of the second step in overcoming OCD. If you haven't watched the first one, I would encourage you to go back and watch that now. It's kind of a linear process, even though there's parts of it that are non-linear, which I'll explain as we go along. But go watch that one. If you have, great. Today we're going to get into the second step. Just for a quick review, the first step is identifying the core fear of what the OCD part of your personality structure is afraid is going to happen to you. With OCD, it's so consuming, and I see just people chasing their tail all over the place with these intermediate fears, like what if I ran over somebody, what if I offended God, what if I am a pedophile, what if I'm going to slash my baby's neck with a knife. All these different ways OCD shows up. And so in all the cases I've worked with, none of those things were ever going to happen to somebody, but parts of them or a part of them was so terrified this horrible thing was going to happen. So become obsessed about that. One of my clients who had that fear of running someone over, hours and hours would get consumed of having to get back on the interstate, loop back around, check all these things. It's a bit like pulling leaves off of a tree and they keep growing back. So that step really helps you just cut through the noise, go right to the heart of it. What's the ultimate fear, where you just keep asking, and then what would happen, and then what would happen, and then what would happen, until there's nowhere less to go. You can also ask the OCD part of you, what's his biggest fear? If it stopped doing its job, what would happen to you? Then I would say, those two things are going to start to give you clarity. Whether it's, if I was a pedophile, what would happen if I was? Well, I'd end up in jail, all my family would abandon me, I'd feel horrible worthlessness and shame. So there's probably a part of your personality that's holding that kind of emotional energy of abandonment or shame. And then I wanted to always acknowledge, give credit where credit's due. This process, there was a couple different influences for me. One was Dr. Dan Siegel, who's a neuroscientist, does a lot around attachment, part of the brain structure is what he calls self-states. And then Dr. Richard Schwartz with internal family systems, where they work with parts of the personality. And we're going to get into all this in these next few videos with a little more clarity. So really this process takes from this research that both of them have done, some of the trainings I've done with both of them, to really integrate into this process that I have found as a psychotherapist the only thing that has fully resolved OCD in my clients with OCD, which can be, again, horrific and utter hell when you have severe OCD to have to live with it. And then most of all these common approaches or the gold standard treatments I have found either not to work, to make things worse, or only work temporarily. So for many of you, it might be strange to think in terms of parts of yourself, that you're not just one thing, but this is a scientific validated thing, is that we have many different parts, many different self-states, as Dan Siegel describes. So the OCD part for me is a protective part of the personality that's trying to protect another part of us that's holding a painful wound from getting activated and flooding our nervous system with that pain, or getting more of that pain. And that has been the case in 100% of the clients that I've worked with. So I'm gonna start to walk you through step 2 now, which is getting access to the wounded, burdened part. So once you've gotten cooperation from that OCD part, you've identified the core fear, that you've asked that part if it would like help. A lot of times many of these parts are completely depleted and exhausted. Any fears that it has, any resistances it has, that when you start to work with this part and ask it, would you be willing to let my core self have access to this wounded part so I could help that part? And when I say core self, the way internal family systems describes it is through these 8 C's. And it's not exclusive to that. People have talked about it in spiritual terms, but I would say it's our highest state. Some refer to it as higher self or true self. The 8 C's are things like calm, compassionate, curious, centered, creative, clarity of thought, a deep sense of connectedness. If I didn't get all 8, that's fine. You can throw in kindness, love, a lot of different things, empathy. So we want to walk through this part of how we get access and start to heal that part of us. So once the OCD part is willing, if it's resistant, that's fine too. One of the things you really want to be clear with this kind of part, IFS would define this kind of part as a manager part. It's trying to prevent painful things from happening. is that I make it really explicit. We are not asking you to stop doing your job. You do not have to quit doing the OCD pattern. We're just saying we know there's one or more parts, which often is the case, that it's more than just one part. But to start with, is there one of those parts that you would be willing to give access to, that I can show you how to use your core self to heal that part? Take as much time as you need, be patient to identify any resistances, and just keep being compassionate and curious till all that's addressed. Eventually the OCD part will soften, or what we call unblending or stepping back, to give you access to that. And then once that happens, what you want to do is just bring your focus of attention like a spotlight inward. And so you really want to stay away from analyzing, problem solving, trying to remember, trying to figure this out. Because what happens is that creates too much activity in the prefrontal cortex, in what's called the executive attention network. And what we want to get activated is what's called the default mode network. And so this is more parts of the midbrain, more primitive areas of the brain that can link things your conscious mind can't. And in most people, these will not activate at the same time. So one goes on, the other goes off. So it may take a few minutes or longer for you to get out of that mode, because that's what we're doing predominantly most of our day, every day, is using this part of the network. But just keep bringing your attention inward without judgment. Mindfulness is just present-centered awareness without judging it, labeling it, qualifying it, and any inner experience. So that's going to be body sensations, emotions might come up that you're not sure why you're feeling those, images, memories, subjective experiences. I might keep seeing a blue, yellow color. I might see the word lost over here, or feel like there's something behind me, like, or an intuitive sense of some part's presence. Parts can show up in imagery that represent the emotional experience. So you might feel like a part laying on the ground looking like it's dead. You know, sometimes if somebody has so much shame, a part of them is holding, it might look like black goop on the ground or feces. That's how that part feels. It's like a worthless, you know what. And so it's not indicative of what the part actually is or looks like of that part of you, but it's just the emotional experience. So just stay patient and see what keeps coming to you. Once there's a sense that you do have access to that part, whether it's a somatic sensation, it doesn't need to be imagery. Most people eventually do get some form of it. I just like it because it's easier to work with, because you can see the part, but we can work with the body just fine. But you can sense maybe where that feeling is held in the body. You could see the part, or see that abstract or constructed image of the part. Then we've got connection to this part of you that's holding this emotional pain or burden in therapeutic terms. That completes step 2. So now in the third video, I'm going to show you step 3 of what to now do with that part once we have access to it. So if you made it this far through step 1 and 2, great, I'm glad you've watched these. The longer you watch these videos, the more you pass them on, the more people we can help. That's our sole mission at Hawkins Counseling Center, is just help as many people heal emotionally, spiritually as we can. So I appreciate your contribution to helping others. And get ready to join us in step 3, where I'm going to walk you through actually how to start healing that part. If you'd like more information about this topic so far, if you'd like to speak to my wife or I, Bissan, about these kind of things, or sit down with us, you can reach us anytime at hawkinscounselingcenter.com. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.